ragged on and really kind of gave some shit to Sixx AM, not being a fan and just not getting it. Not necessarily saying it was bad, but not saying it was any darn good either. But well before this album came out, and Biv doesn't even know this, about a month ago or so, I started, I don't know what made me listen to it again, but I went back in, because one of my favorite tracks from Prayers from the Damned was You Have Come to the Right Place. I thought that was a great song. And I don't know how or why, but it got in my head out of nowhere. And so I listened to it again, and then I start listening to the whole album, and I go, what the hell was wrong with me? This was a really good album that I said was decent at best the first time we reviewed it. So, going into Prayers for the Blessed, I'm like now excited to do a review that 6 months ago I was going, whatever. Because I'll tell you what, this is, Nikki Sixx essentially has moved on to this is the first, Prayers for the Damned, Prayers for the Blessed was the first, Sixx AM, let's be real, for not only James Michael, but for Nikki Sixx and, of course, for DJ Ashbo was kind of the side project band. It was the, we got our own thing going on, but, we'll do this on the side. And this double album, if you will, was really the first album in which people are like, okay, this is our focus now of a band. And, I think a lot of that shows. And so when you hear songs like Barbarians, for example, which we just played for you, you'll notice these guys just know how to write a crazy hooky chorus that even if they have a beginning and a verse that's, it's okay, a minute into the track, you're pulled in because the chorus is catchier than hell. Barbarians is a great example of that. Next track is We Will Not Go Quietly, which is a mid-tempo rocker. And let me just address this. DJ Ashba, the guitar player, just has a great knack of writing some riffs that are nothing over the top, nothing incredibly intricate, or just will blow, not John Petrucci in any way, shape, or form. This is just good, catchy, I guess to use Biv's word, accessible rock, that's just done very well, written very well. There's a couple hit or misses there. Maybe It's Time, which is a rock ballad I'm sure that Biv will love, but really good vocals on it. And I also will say this, I kind of knocked him in my previous review of Prayers for the Damned. James Michael vocally has really grown on me quite a bit. The Devil's Coming is one of my favorite songs on the album. Great riff, killer chorus, like really, really good chorus. You hear Catacombs, which is also known as Eruption, from DJ Ashba. I'm like, okay, so are we doing our impression of Van Halen's Eruption, and it's the Sixx AM spin on it? It's basically an instrumental guitar solo. Now, DJ Ashba could wail, don't get me wrong, and the dude is really, really good, and you'll hear some of the solos that are very, very well done and obviously very intricate. But when it comes to riffs, man, he doesn't try to make it more difficult than it needs to be. He just writes good riffs and says, here it is, and it's simplistic, it's accessible, it's very radio friendly, and it's a shame that it's not, because there's a lot of tracks on this album that could stand out on a decent hard rock radio station that, I'm sure they're playing Rob Zombie for the 28th time today, or Five Finger Death Punch, or, Shinedown, instead of playing Sixx AM, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of really, really good songs on here. Suffocate, by the way, Biv, I don't know what your thoughts were on this, has a very double drive sound to me even. There's a couple of songs that even give me that vibe. Just overall, I'm telling you, unfortunately, Helicopters ends the album kind of underwhelmingly. Probably one of not the weakest track on the album, which kind of stinks because the rest of the album is very well done. And if you haven't got a chance to check out Prayers for the Damned, which I actually think was just as good, if not a little bit better than Prayers for the Blessed, which we're reviewing now, but both very, very good, accessible hard rock albums. If you are a hard rock fan, if you're not necessarily a metalhead, this would be, and I think I've said this before, but I'm going to borrow a book out of the page or a page out of the book of Jason once again and say this is the kind of rock that I could put on in the car, turn this album on, and my wife, who's not a metalhead by any means, but is a fan of Goddard and Bon Jovi and Def Leppard and kind of that 80s, 90s hard rock vibe would listen to this and go, oh, this is pretty cool. She likes Double Drive, by the way, too. But you get my point. Like, that she'd be fine with. And I think if you have friends like that,
she's a keeper, by the
way. Yes, exactly. Just based on that alone. But if you're a hard rock fan, in any of those bands are up your alley, this is right in that wheelhouse, and I think you're really, really going to like it. So I apologize to you, Biv. I apologize to the listeners or the Sixx AM fans out there by being, I guess, what you would consider a closed-minded asshole the first time around. Prayers for the Blessed is a 7.5 out of 10 for me, and a really, really solid album. I've been really impressed with it, and I'm now a fan, which I'm happy to say.
Wow. All right. Now, if I can just get you to stop burning tires in your backyard on Earth Day, we'll be in good shape.
No, that'll never happen. You have a much better chance of me being a Sixx AM fan club member and, running their website than you do me not burning tires in my backyard. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, so this was a CD that we're coming into that, as you said, you weren't necessarily I guess you kind of went back and listened to Prayers for the Damned, but you're not a longtime Sixx AM fan like I have been since back in the Heroin Diaries. So with me having more of a reference point to go back to than you, this is something this was one of my most anticipated releases since going back this past spring when Prayers for the Damned came out. And Barbarians, which we played, what a great way to lead off a CD.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is... If ever there was a song written by them to lead off a CD with, that's it. It's just really, really good. Of course, most of you have probably heard We Will Not Go Quietly. There's a video out for it. Wolf at Your Door I could live without. That's one of the few on the album that I could live without.
Yeah, I wrote okay song next to it. That's all I wrote.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's about all it does to you.
Yeah.
You just go, and then you move on to the next track. Maybe it's time. You're right. My pants were off within 30 seconds.
Okay, so there we go. At least one ballad on this episode Biv took his pants off for. That's a good thing.
Oh, yeah, I did. The Devil's Coming. I love. What a great tune. I was really surprised that you did not mention That's Gonna Leave a Scar.
Yeah, because it's very Barbarian sounding. That's a good track. You're right. Good point.
It is a very good, very, very good track. Now, I don't know and you also did not mention Without You, which is a Harry Nilsson remake from the 70s.
And Mariah Carey did it as well.
Oh, did she? I had no idea.
But, so I heard this. In fact, true story, I'm listening to the album, and my wife's listening to it with me, and not really saying it's good or bad, just kind of listening to it. And she starts singing this song as it's playing, and I'm like, yeah, it's funny. I know this song, and I don't know why I know this song. Even though it's like the first time I've heard it, and I went, oh, that's why. Because, of course, my wife's like, oh, I know this song. And I'm like... Because
you're a big Mariah Carey fan.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, who isn't? I have posters on my wall. In the Kensington Place studios, I have an actually 8x10 glossy picture of Mariah Carey when she wasn't a crazy-ass cokehead.
So, in other words, you don't have a picture?
No, at one point she wasn't crazy or insane.
But I do want to talk about Helicopters.
Okay.
Because the mood of Prayers for the Damned was darker, right?
Yes.
And Prayers for the Blessed was more lighthearted.
Yes. Agreed.
And I think, and the title suggests that. And I really thought that because as I'm listening to Helicopters, what's going through my head is you're, to steal a page out of your book, you're always saying start strong, finish strong. You like the bookends.
Sure.
You want something to really remember it by. And usually I totally am agreeing with you on that. But I think when you say stay strong, you mean usually heavier. When I say stay strong, it's a song that needs to fit the mood of the album and leave you with an impression. And I think what Helicopters did coming out of the double CD.
Yeah, I guess
it's a song that finishes the story, so to speak. It's not a concept album. I don't mean that in any way like that. But it's the kind of song that finishes the mood. And so for that reason, I really liked it. Now, the very first time I heard it, I'm like, this should probably be track 6 or 7. But as I listened to it a second, third, or fourth time, I began to realize why it's the last song on the double CD.
Yeah, and you know what? If you're listening to this review, guys, and I'll take this from me, I will now go back and listen to that track maybe with what you just said in mind and see if it's different for me now. That's a good point.
Okay, but that being said, I gave it an 8.5 out of 10.
Wow.
Solid CD.
Yeah, no, it's really good, guys. Seriously, if you again, I've admitted my mistakes on this episode. Biv, can't remember his day planner because he's 70 years old. He bitches about Uber, but damn it, I'll tell you what, when it comes to 6 a.m., he knows what he's talking about. Shame on me for being late to the party, but 6 a.m., Prayers for the Blessed, and if you haven't listened to Prayers for the Damned, listen to both of them. They're worth buying. They're both worth picking up. Check them out.
Hey, the piper, here we go, now take it for one-way journey. Say the piper, come follow, even if you're ordinary. There's a place for you here, raise the anchor, all aboard as the captain calls his misfits. This ghost ship sets up to shake the world.
All right, well, that was Theocracy with the title track Ghost Ship. This is a CD that Jason and I have both been anticipating now quite a few years ago. And actually, and Jason, you may recall this, but the very first time we seriously talked about launching this podcast was on the way back from where we saw Theocracy at a very small church. They had like this very small side building. And Theocracy and Pastor Bob Beeman and a few other bands were there doing some type of a Christian metal, I don't know what you would call it, a festival, I guess. And so there's like maybe, 200 of us there, if that? I don't even think there were that many. Maybe 100 people. But
yeah.
You and I went down to Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and saw this band play. Now, I had been a Theocracy fan going all the way back to their first album was already out, and I think As the World Bleeds was coming out. To me, they just were that just very first Christian band I ever heard that could stand up to anybody, anywhere, anytime. Now, the knock that we've always had on Christian bands is that musically, they just weren't as good as your secular bands. And this was the first band that I could put up against anybody and say, listen to this, and tell me they're not as good, as technically proficient as anyone else. And so, you may recall this, I introduced them to you, I think in 2010, Jason, when I came up to South Bend for the Notre Dame, Michigan game.
Yeah. Yeah, we listened to Mirror of Souls, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. And I think that's when you kind of started getting into them and whatever. So, when I found out they were playing that I think it was called the Flames of Music venue or festival, we were like, we got to go. Because Elizabethtown, Kentucky is like 2 hours from where I live. So Jason drove down, then we drove down there, and we had a great time. Came back, Snowball had taken a roll of paper towels and completely just decimated my apartment. Yes.
I forgot about that.
I don't know if you recall that or not.
No, and he had milk rings, though, so he was fine.
Yeah. But at any rate, so going into this review, Jason and I were both huge Theocracy fans. And so we have a lot leading up to, a lot of expectations leading up to this. And now we're going to find out, did they meet him? Because it's been 6 years, believe it or not, 6 years since their last CD came out. And when you wait 6 years for something, like we waited 8 years for Metallica, you waited 20 years for Guns N' Roses, you waited whatever, you build up an anticipation that it better be damn good to live up to that. So, Jason, did it live up to that for you?
Well, I'll tell you what. When I first heard Mirror of Souls, I was blown away. Matt Smith is incredible.